Welcome back to Good Morning, and your host is me.
So, welcome back to Good Morning, and I'm your host today, and we're going to take a look at two things today. One is a poem, and the other one is some breaking news. 5 minutes into the future, breaking news will happen that the PS3 and Xbox 360 war is celebrating their anniversary as they do with every year. We're kind of expecting that, but what we're not expecting is that the PS3 and Xbox 360 war has more tension than ever building up. And there's only one person who can endure all the torture and save us all. Now for the poem. 1 gallon of milk. A carton of eggs.
He stole my chair!
PlayStation 3, decontamination?
Yes.
This is the first ever full system that I have ever covered. I have built up enough courage to do this. What we need to do though is different categories. But it's so fun not to care.
It was going well so far.
We're going to see how it went from being this, to this, to this, and to this.
Oh wait, wrong one.
The PS3 hands down is the best party item. The launch of a game system will show how much the company cares about their consumers and the system itself. If they don't, basically deal with it. If I can't get Nintendo to answer my calls, then you're not going to get Sony to change their mind. But when a system launches, the question gets brought up every single time. Which one will outdo the Nintendo Wii?
Huh, it kind of looks like neither.
The Sony PlayStation 3 had consumer content like Netflix in mind and the ability to play PS2 and PS1 games, until they changed their mind 12 different times.
It's mating season.
PS3 launched November 11th, 2006. Within the first 24 hours, more than 81,000 systems were sold. Well, I can guess why so many were sold.
PlayStation 3 was a powerhouse of a console with a powerful cell processor and a Blu-ray drive.
It was also a powerhouse of a noisemaker with a massive power consumption and a loud fan. This thing could drown out your entire TV in the living room.
Thank God I have the PS3 with me.
The PS3 launched for either $499 for 20 gigabytes or $599 for 60 gigabytes.
Come on, don't be shy now.
This thing is heavy.
That's unhealthy.
It's bad enough that it's going to set you worse than student loans, but does it really have to be this heavy? PS1 and PS2 support were obvious things that made this thing super expensive, featuring actual PS2 parts. That ensures 100% compatibility with it, but did they really have to make it try to be the next Spider-Man? With Blu-ray support being the primary format for any game being released on here, on top of an incredibly hard-to-learn CPU that was only for this system, a bunch of things piled up to be a big mess that cost as much as... yeah, sure.
I mean, it's either this or... Pink Eye.
PS3 launched with like 14 whole titles, which this was the era that PS3 games were bad. Call of Duty 3 is the one I'll be most interested in. If it isn't like the past two Call of Duty games, then I don't know what to do with myself. This is the only Call of Duty game that did not get a PC release.
How dare they?
The PS3 also had Marvel's Ultimate Alliance, and also with a concept for Gran Turismo, the most disgusting piece of plastic I have ever touched. Yet that's to name a few. Oh, I'll get to you. Revisions to a game system is something that companies can try to modernize it for 5 seconds after release, but normally you could tell that something's off.
It's not this.
They can do all sorts of things like remove features, add features, make it more environmental friendly, or even none of that. After the original model launched, they thought, what would heavy breathing do? And thus the PS3 was born. Again, 2 less USB ports and no more SD card slot, 1 point towards the Wii. Also removing the PS2 support as well.
Well, I was going to stay abstinent. But sure!
And then the next 2 revisions were basically the same feature-wise, while doing everything in their power to make them cheaper than the previous model. PS3 Slim, obviously the best one out of any model there has been. Then, we get to terminal illness. This looks like it's trying to play peekaboo with me. Every console needs a marketing campaign. The PS3 needs to run for president, so that's why we have...
You have a rare disease.
Oh, how rare is it?
We'll just pick the name.
Arthritis. They will never know!
Look, I know not all ads are great, but they aren't the PS3 ad with the baby. Yeah, during the beginning, Sony thought, let's scare people. All they are is just a PS3 in a white room with something random happening. I think you need a bit more information. You need to let people know that you're in for this, but you can't do what Nintendo does. That's just bad. This was trying to show off the power of the PS3 system.
I misunderstood the assignment.
Then they hired Kevin Butler to take on the PS3 ads when they revised the PS3 in 2009. The whole marketing scheme here is the reduced price of $2.99. These ads went on with his regular consumer talking to Kevin Butler for quite a while, until they fired him for showing up randomly in a Mario Kart commercial. Absolutely none of these show off the performance of the games. But guess where that brings us to? One of the key points of buying a home console is to have the best possible experience.
I thought it was because they wanted a boner.
Numerous amount of factors play into this, such as resolution, performance, visuals. Well, I hate to break it to you. During the beginning of the PS3's life, games were performing awful. You know, I could have picked worse words. This system had barely any support from third-party games, and when it did happen, I mean, you had other options. Would you like a choice of a dead system or a dead system? It was definitely a rough road at the beginning, but later on in the console's life, games actually performed better than Xbox 360. For example, Sonic Unleashed, reaching 60 FPS on PS3. You were 12 years too late, Microsoft. This thing, no doubt, had features upon features. I'm sure it had functionality for breakfast. You can do basically limitless things, like have a government use it for a supercomputer. And somehow Sony can't figure out how to get the PS5 to run PS3 games.
Ooh, that's gonna scar.
They picked out the laziest way and say, well, on a technicality.
Well, on a technicality, I did study for the exam. Did I study the wrong material?
One feature that was kind of used as a selling point for the PS3 was the Other OS functionality, which turned your PS3 into a PC. Sony realized this was a security concern and removed it entirely in an update. Well, that definitely worked in their favor. Another feature is the newly added online gaming aspect. Yeah, Sony had functionality for online play with PS2 games, but barely any game supported it, and it was a hit or miss if the game even had decent gameplay. The Microsoft Xbox 360 had the ability to play online for only $10 a month, and the cloud saves were free. What did PS3 offer? Oh. Yeah, Sony PS3 wanted to make another punch towards Microsoft and say, we got balls too, you know. Blu-ray support, streaming service functionality, HDMI, CD, DVD, playback. This thing had everything that you can possibly think of. The Other OS feature was removed in an update to prevent jailbreaking consoles, and PS2 support was removed in PS3 revisions that looks nearly identical. But I'm sure Sony knew what they were doing. Right? Well, I'll get to you later. The PS3 controller, and my thoughts?
Yeah, Microsoft's tastes better.
This thing had a decade-old design. The original PlayStation DualShock had this design, and the design continued for the PS2. Then we have the PS3 controller now. Got the cord. I hope they don't mean the phone cord. The good old saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But they abused it here. This form factor is majorly uncomfortable, and the triggers are just too odd. Now let's compare this to the PS4 and Xbox 360 controller. The PS4 still uses the same button placement, but they fixed so much that earlier controllers had issues with. The 360 controller? I can't believe they've done it. This is the controller I would normally go for. This controller is not official, why would Sony do that? But this got everything that the PS4 controllers had done, and just threw it out the window and said, why don't we copy the neighbors? The home menu is like a first impression. If you're weird, then you get the label of weird. Throughout the PS3's life, the home menu hasn't changed a whole lot. Categories upon categories. It's also quick and snappy. You have game. You know what this is. The only thing with this one, though, is that someone might have a bit of an issue trying to find what they want. Let's take a look at what Microsoft done. Yeah, I don't like.
I mean, yeah, sure, some of the issues due to the companies and all that stuff, but whoa!
Yes, I have felt nostalgia before. It's like an addiction. Backwards compatibility on the PS3 is harder to learn than a lesson at Harvard. Trust me, I've tried. During the beginning, the PS3 had actual PS2 parts inside that guaranteed 100% compatibility with PS2 games. That's why the bank is going to repossess the home. This drove up costs dramatically because you're essentially buying two systems in one. Shortly after, though, in an attempt to reduce the price, they removed PS2 parts in favor for emulation. Yeah, this sort of compatibility, but I'm sure that the IRS don't like that, and it's funny. Later models, or just the remaining models, removed the functionality for any PS2 disc in general, but they kept PS1 support in. I want to play SpongeBob, not SpongeBob. Yeah, I have no clue in this category. Trying to find information on this category is harder than what you think. That's the question I've asked all these years. PS3 is easily available now, and it's super cheap. I have like 5 of them.
Why do I exist?
Mainly, I see the PS4 everywhere now, taking over the PS3, but you still need the PS3 because you can't play those games on PS4 or PS5. Since it would have to be done through emulation, apparently it's too hard for the PS5. But not for the community! Emulation is ever prevalent, we have to accept that. But sometimes, the community just does it better. Somehow they got PS3 games running on PC and even having it run better than ever. After the PS4 and Xbox One released, the PS3 started to get games that were for the next generation systems, and they just went back to really bad games. But overall, the PS3 put up a very good fight, especially towards the end. Sony was finally realizing that they needed to get everything back on board in order to make money. And boy, did they win.
And that's it for the torture today. Now, of course, the PS3 had some rough patches, but overall, it's one of my favorite systems ever. Behind the Wii U. Now, of course, does this mean anything bad? I hope not.